I'm Jacob Nielsen. I want to thank the Human Factors and Ergonomics Society for naming me one of the titans of human factors. It's an honor. Thank you very much. Now let's remember from Greek mythology that the Titans were the children of Uranus, the sky, and Gaia, the earth, which I think is very appropriate for this interdisciplinary field of user experience that I work with. But let's also remember that the Titans had a war with Zeus, the king of the gods, for 10 years, and Zeus won and imprisoned the Titans. Now, one Titan who was not imprisoned was Atlas, who instead was condemned to stand at the edge of the world and carry the weight of the heavens on his shoulders. And I have to say, for many years in the beginning of my career, maybe I felt a little like Atlas, being resigned to stand at the edge of the world and carry a heavy burden, because what I did was not very recognized in the early years. I started in user experience 41 years ago when I was in Denmark. At the time, the entire country had 3 jobs in the field. 3 real jobs, 2 in each of the 2 biggest software development companies, and each of those 2 people were supporting maybe about 1,000 developers each. Then there was a 3rd job at the Nuclear Power Research Center. But those 3 jobs were already taken. So I had to become a university professor instead. And I started the first user interface design course at the Technical University of Denmark. And it became very popular with the students. I also had several really great graduate students, but when they graduated, they could not get jobs in user experience because, as I mentioned, there were only 3 jobs in the country. They were taken. And so they all had to get jobs as normal programmers. So that was very disappointing to me. So while I was a university professor, I wrote this textbook, Hypertext and Hypermedia. And this was the world's 2nd textbook on hypertext. Ben Shneiderman beat me by a few months to publish the world's first book on hypertext. But my book came out in a 2nd edition a few years later after the web had become big. So I worked on hypertext and I worked on hypermedia and on usability, and I applied for several research grants to research these topics, but I was turned down. So the Danish equivalent of the National Science Foundation did not want to support research on hypertext. They thought it was just too uninteresting a topic. Of course, just a few years later, hypertext became the foundation for the internet. So that just shows you the short-sightedness of those research funding agencies. So I got tired of the narrow-mindedness of the academic community, and so I accepted the job to move to the United States and join the telephone company. So I worked for Bell Communications Research, which was the spin-off from Bell Labs that was owned by the regional Bell operating companies. And this was at the time one of the world's top 3 research labs in user experience. And so when I worked there, I continued to work on online information and hypertext, and I continued to work on usability methods, on making it easy and simple and cheap to make designs easy. And if the methods are easy and cheap, they'll get used more often. As a result of that, I published this textbook, Usability Engineering. And this has actually become since my most cited work, with more than 26,000 citations in Google Scholar. That book came out in 1993. Now, it was great to work at the telephone company at the lab. It was such an enormously great laboratory. But the downside was that the phone companies were very conservative and reluctant and slow to implement any new technologies or any innovations that came out of the labs. So when the dot-com bubble started, I actually moved to Silicon Valley and accepted the job from Sun Microsystems as a distinguished engineer. And I was hired to make Unix easy to use. But the distinguished engineers at Sun Microsystems were the top 0.1% of the technical talent in the company. And the job description was, well, since you are the world's #1 expert on your particular topic, you should figure out what's important to work on. That's a great job description, right? And so I decided that what was important to work on was web usability. This was again the beginning of the dot-com bubble. And it was very important for Sun Microsystems because the company sold many of these big expensive servers that ran all those websites. So I worked on making websites easier to use and discover what makes a website easier difficult. As a result, I published this book, Designing Web Usability, which actually has become my most popular work, translated into 26 different languages. And this really put usability on the map for websites during the dot-com bubble and for the internet. And it was a very, very important book. And I kept working for many more years in web usability. I published many more books that I'll spare you those. The Designing Web Usability came out in 1999. That was the foundational book. And I worked for many, many more years in web usability. But here, the last year, I've actually changed my focus to work instead on artificial intelligence, on making AI easy to use. Because history has sadly repeated itself once again. A new technology comes out and human factors is ignored. The design is purely based on engineering perspectives, not on human needs. And that's why there's a lot of usability problems in the current AI products. They're still used a lot because they're so enormously great in terms of functionality, but the user interface, the user experience is sorely lacking. And there are things like the articulation barrier is hard to prompt for most normal people who are not like very highly educated PhDs and all that, but for normal people it's hard. And so that's what I'm working on. I'm really working on evangelizing that AI needs to have better usability, be designed for humans. We need to involve all our user experience methodologies in artificial intelligence. I think AI is the most important thing to happen in computing since the web, since the personal computer. In fact, I think it's more important than those two put together. It's more on line with the Industrial Revolution in importance. Now, in the Industrial Revolution, we replaced muscle power, either human muscle or animal muscles, with machine power like steam engines and so forth. And in the AI revolution, we are not replacing but supplementing human brain power, human cognition with computer cognition. And so the two can work together. And I'm really advocating a synergy between human and AI to be the true way to drive forward. So symbiance, I call it. And we can have vastly improved productivity, vastly improved creativity, vastly improved job satisfaction. People like it more when the tedious things are taken away and they can stay in the flow and focus on being creative because AI supports them. I call artificial intelligence a forklift for the mind because it uplifts our cognition. So that I think is super important, and that's what I'm focusing on now. And it's a big job, but I think I'm actually very, very optimistic that just as we've been successful in the past with making PCs easier to use, making the web easier to use, now for the next several years, we can make AI easier to use. Thank you very much.